Today we're going to cover some workflow basics for getting a file from Revit ready for use in 3ds Max. Here's our agenda. First, we are going to cover the presets that can be used when linking a Revit file into 3ds Max. Each preset will treat the imported geometry a little bit differently. As for the file itself, you can link in a Revit file directly or export an FBX file and bring that in. We will look at a couple of differences between those two methods. Once we have a file in Max, we will take a look at the scene converter, which is the tool we use to make sure that the lights and materials are compatible with the rendering engine we'll be using. Lastly, we'll spend a few minutes on some basics in the Slate material editor. Before we bring a file into 3ds Max, I want to talk about the list of presets that are available. Each preset will treat the model differently after we bring it in. So for our example today, we're going to pretend that we're primarily a Revit user who occasionally uses Max. Our goal is to bring in our model and get it ready for rendering with as little hassle as possible. I have the Revit file ready to go, and I also have exported one of the 3D camera views to an FBX file. When you link in a file, whether it's Revit or FBX, the first thing to do is choose a preset, which will combine like elements into one, making it easier to select, make changes, and explore options. Typically, a Revit user is going to focus on materials and lights when in Max, so any tactic we can use to streamline our time will be useful. Another thing the presets will do for us is determine what to bring in from the Revit model or what not to bring in. This first preset will combine elements by the material that's assigned to them. For example, in Revit, if all the windows have a material named glass for the glazing, that will become a single selectable object in Max. So all the windows will be one single selection once it's in Max. So that makes it quicker and easier to make changes and explore options for each material. Plus, the materials are easy to read. They're not too complex on screen when in the event we need to make changes. The next preset combines elements by their category. For example, all the walls are treated as a single object in Max. However, you can still work with the materials for each individual wall in case they're different for each family type. The material here has a more nested appearance, which may seem a bit intimidating at first. The next preset combines elements by their family type. For example, in Revit, if a wall type with the name exterior insulation on masonry, you'll also see that entry in Max, and it will be the same element. Again, the materials will appear nested, but you'll be able to see the same entries that were chosen in Revit. The last one relating to Revit combines the entire model into a single object. The whole model is a single selection, and as you can see, the above material looks very complicated. All the materials are included and they work, but when you look at them in this fashion, it's very difficult to navigate. So at least there's plenty of choices for you depending on how you need to work with the model once it's in Max. Okay. When you're ready to bring a model from Revit into Max, you'll need to be aware of a few things as the file that you will use will behave differently. And even though you're still working with a Revit model, there are two file formats that you can use. The RVT file, Revit's native file type, and FBX. When you're linking a Revit file, all you need is the file. It is not required to have Revit installed on your computer for this. When you perform the link and choose a preset, Max will create a connection with that file. And it's able to do this because there is an interoperability component that comes with Max that makes this possible. After the link is established, you'll get prompted to choose one of the camera views that were created in Revit. Even though you're choosing one view, all of the cameras that were created in Revit will be brought into Max as their own separate views. And depending on the project's position in Revit, it's possible that the model will appear to be above or below zero elevation in the Max environment. This is okay because Max does not need to rely on the project or the survey point in Revit. So just keep that in mind. Now, when you're linking an FBX file that was exported from Revit, you'll actually be starting in Revit because you have to export one of your 3D camera views. So you want to make sure that your element visibility is set accordingly before exporting. The exported file will contain all of the necessary information about the model for use in Max. Once that file's been created, Revit is no longer required in this workflow moving forward, unless changes are needed, of course. Now, it will load a little quicker than when you're linking the Revit file directly. And this method is used when the Max user is a different person or someone who doesn't use Revit, or you simply want the link to load more quickly. Now, this method also will only include the one camera view. That's a difference between linking Revit and linking FBX. With Revit, you'll get all the cameras. In the FBX, you'll only get the one that you exported. In the end, you still have all the information that you'll need. Now, this method has one caveat. All of the lights will be turned off by default. And it's hard to produce a rendering when there's no light in the scene. So it's critical that you turn the lights on before proceeding any further. Let's link an FBX file into Max. All of the commands for linking files are located in the File menu. I'll choose Link FBX and then select my file. I'll use the preset Combined by Revit material here. I'll also take a quick look at its settings by going to the Modify command on the Presets tab. This is where you can decide which elements to include in the link. I'll include the lights, the daylight system, and the cameras. I'm happy with the settings, so I'll return to the Attach tab and attach the file. This may take a few minutes depending on the size and complexity of the model. This one won't take too long. And you may get prompted regarding the conversion of the daylight system. Since I chose to include it, I'll choose yes, close the dialog, and in one of the viewports, set it to the camera view provided. A quick glance at this view shows all of the lights as black balls. And this means that the lights are turned off. So for a closer look, I'll change the viewport layout to a single and reset the view to the camera. If needed, change the visual style to default shading, which is one we typically use in Max. That way we can get a sense of the scene. Next, I'll select one of the black balls, turn it on in its properties, and notice that a few more turn on with it. And that's because they are instances of the same light. So I'll just work my way around the scene and repeat this for the rest of the lights. Now, by making sure all of the lights are on before proceeding, we'll do that before we run the scene converter. So let's look at what happens when we don't turn the lights on first. I'm going to go ahead and run the scene converter. I'll talk about that in more detail in a few minutes. It's in the rendering menu. And this tool has presets available as well. And I'm using one that is for the Arnold renderer. Now, after conversion, when I turn one of the lights on, only that light is affected. They don't turn on in groups like they did before. This could be a big deal if there are a high number of lights in the scene and you have to turn them on individually. It's also why we turn the lights on before we run the scene converter, because we lose that instance parent or parent-child relationship among the light types. And you can try a right-click select similar. The problem here is you won't have access to any properties because all of the lights are selected. So if you don't have that many lights, this will be okay. But if there's too many, this could be an issue. Fortunately, there is a tool that can help speed this process up. It's called the Light Lister. It's found in the Tools menu. The Light Lister shows all of the lights in a list with the On button right next to them. Although it's still one at a time, you can turn on the lights a bit quicker than selecting them in your scene. Plus, you don't have to turn on all of the lights that are in the model, just the ones that are relevant to your scene. So I'll choose a few. I'll move the dialog around in order to make sure the right lights are turned on, and then I'll close the light lister. Okay, time to review what we've covered so far. Remember, when you're using an FBX file, it must be exported from one of your 3D camera views in Revit. FBX files do load faster. However, you can always link the Revit file directly. After linking, set one of the viewports to the desired camera view, set the visual style to default shading, and if needed, maximize the viewport. Remember to turn the lights on at this point. When linking an FBX, all the lights will be off. When linking a Revit file, all the lights will be on by default. After turning the lights on is when you'll run the scene converter. That way you'll have that instance relationship. Each type of light is grouped among themselves, so you only have to turn one of each on versus after you convert where we lose that ability. Okay, we've covered the lights. Now we will take a closer look at the scene converter. To start, I'm going to try to render the scene just to see what's going on. And as soon as I do that, I get some error messages about the materials not being supported. Max uses the same library of materials as Revit, but the software does not use the same renderer, so we have to convert the scene. Again, I'll go to the rendering menu and choose the scene converter. There are some out-of-box presets. Over here on the right, we can examine which types of material are included. Same for the lights and a few other object types. You can tailor these presets to make sure everything you need gets converted. On the left, I'll add a material type that's not included and how it will be converted over on the right side. I have a custom preset ready to use here that will include all types of material. I want to make sure I don't miss anything. In addition, you can include some render settings as part of a preset. Now that it's converted, let's do another test render. Much better than before, and the errors are gone. Next, we'll turn our attention to the materials to make sure they look correct and improve the overall quality. I'm going to change the view to show 4 viewports again, and then open the Slate material editor. Then drag one of the materials onto the canvas. Since I use combine by material as a preset when I link the file, each material is its own node here. It's easy to see and work with. It has the same name that was given to it in Revit, plus all of the images from the library. I'm going to work with these one at a time, so I'll select this material to remove it from the canvas. Another way to access material is with the eyedropper and clicking a surface in your scene. This material seems to be okay, but there's a black box on one of the image nodes. Now, this means that the image is missing or Max can't find it. We could track down that image and fix the path, or we can use one of the material presets. And because all of the materials were converted to a physical material, the presets are available here. So I'll just choose one of the concrete presets and then remove the leftovers from the canvas. So I would do this on each material that's visible in the scene to make sure there's no missing items underneath each material. Another test render, see where we're at. Now there's no need to wait for a render to finish right now, so I'll just click cancel. We're in test mode. So we just want to make sure everything is working. Now there is light in the scene, but notice that the windows appear very dark. Let's go back to the material editor and use the eyedropper on the glass. I'll just bring it up. I could deal with the settings here. What I'm going to do though is create a whole new physical material. Just going to drop it in and then use one of the presets that is good for Windows. It's the one called Glass Thin Geometry. I'll click and hold on the connector here, then drag and drop it onto one of the windows. And since they're all combined, I only have to do this once. And that will update that material. Next, I'll clone the render window and then render the scene again and compare. And we're just looking at the windows this time, and you can see more reflections now. If you look above some of the furniture, you can see a difference between the two. You can also see the difference in the skylight. So it looks like we're headed in the right direction. Think about what's missing though. There doesn't seem to appear to be any light from outside yet. And the only shadows are coming from the interior lights. To address this, I'll use the Scene Explorer. That's the menu down the left side. I'm going to use the filters on the left to show me all of the lights in the scene. And I'm going to go after the one called Sun Positioner. This, and then in its properties, I'll install the sun and sky environment. I'll go back and clone the render window again for another test. Okay, now we're getting some light. We're actually getting too much light from outside. What this means is that the camera is overexposed. So I'll select the camera. I'll do that again from the Scene Explorer. I'll turn off the filter for the lights, and I'll see the cameras that are in the view. There's the camera for this scene. We'll go to its properties and change the exposure value. A higher value on the camera's exposure will make the scene darker. Then we'll do another test render. And the scene's looking much better. Again, I'm going to cancel the render. We don't need to wait for it to finish here. The last thing I'll do here is select the sun positioner again. And then set the location, which will be somewhere on Earth. I can also set the time, the date for a more specific look. And then I'll do one more test render. And by working with the position of the sun, you can get different light and shadow effects. So if you look at the floor here, there's much more descriptive shadows along the floor than there was in the previous test. And all I did was move the sun by changing the time of day. From here, the next step would be to work on the quality, the overall quality for your scene. Although we're not focusing on that today, the noise, pixelation, etc., that is the next step. Okay, let's review the workflow so far. First, we linked in our file, which was an FBX. We configured one of the viewports for our camera. We checked the on-off settings for the lights. Remember, if you are working with FBX files, the lights will be off by default. After that, we ran the scene converter using a tailored preset to include all the material types. After we convert the scene, we review the materials. We updated one with a physical material preset. We did that for the concrete in that particular case. We also created a new one for the glazing. Again, all we did was drop a physical material onto the canvas and chose a preset. Finally, we added the external environment so that the light from the outside could be included in the final shot. Now, there are other ways to do the exterior lighting. I'm just using one of those ways as an example here by installing the sun and sky environment. In a future webcast, we will pick up from here and focus on the quality of the final rendering. Okay, that wraps up the topics for today. Now I'll answer any questions that are in the chat panel. Okay, so far I see two questions here. The first question is, will this workflow work for walkthroughs? Yes, it will. Whether we are linking in from the FBX or Revit, usually we'll build our walkthroughs in Max though. But it is possible to do exactly what we did here today to get your walkthrough ready. Well, we start with the lights, the materials, just to get the overall look, and then however many frames that you're going to wind up producing out of Max. If these items are already addressed, then you'll be good to go. So a short answer, yes. Next question, how does the FBX deal with the IES lighting web with 3D elements of the lighting fixture? Okay, excellent question there. A lot of you in Revit may be attaching IES files to the light fixtures. That would be something you would want to check after you link in your file. And that's whether it's a Revit file or an FBX file. Sometimes Max may not be able to find those file locations for your IES files. So you would check those in the same manner as you would walk through your materials. You want to just give them a scan, give them that once over. And there is a path setting to an IES file in each light fixture. Now, because of that instance relationship, make sure you check your IES file locations before you run the scene converter. Okay, that's very important, because as soon as you run the scene converter, the instance relationship is blown away. If you have a lot of lights that are using an IES file, making sure that Max can find the IES file, you want to do that before you run the scene converter, because you only have to do it to one of each type of light that you have in your model. If you do it after, you have to go to each light and touch it and then path it back to your IES file. Now, something that we'll cover in training is how we can set up Max so it knows where to look on your workstation for files like that. And when we do that, that can help. But it's still important to check each one, at least the ones that are visible through your camera view. Yeah, excellent question there. Recording, yes. As Ashley stated at the beginning of the webcast, tomorrow, a recording of this webcast will be available on Hagerman.com as well as on our YouTube channel. And I believe you'll receive an email with a link to this recording sometime tomorrow. Okay, next question. Should the linked model be removed from BIM 360 before linking? Not necessarily. If your file happens to be on BIM 360, you can still link through it through your Autodesk desktop connector. So all your files are going to be cached locally anyway. Now, if it's more of a one-way situation, which it might be, you could download a copy of the Revit file or just open your model from BIM 360 in Revit like you normally would and export an FBX file, because that file does not have to be collaborated once it's FBX, so you could do it that way. All right, next question is also about the recording. Again, it'll be available tomorrow. All right, next question. Does Max read the IES orientation parameters that were chosen in Revit? Yes, it does. It doesn't change any settings, rotation, tilt angle, things like that. So all Max needs to be able to do is find the IES file. But what's internal to the IES file, no, Max won't revert any settings that you might have made in there. All right, next question. What is the advantage of linking an FBX file or just importing a DWG? Well, DWG is not a part of this webcast. We don't need DWGs coming from Revit. An FBX file is Max's special format for moving between programs. It does load quicker. So if you were to do a comparison, linking in a Revit file directly or linking in an FBX, I think you'll find that the FBX will come into Max quicker than the Revit file. And it's also, gets it out of Revit, it's separate, and you don't have to be a Revit user to do this. Once you have the FBX, then that's all that's required to work in Max. So sorry if I read too fast there on the DWG portion. So advantage, it does load quicker. Okay. So I guess another advantage there could be if there are, a very high number of lights in the model as a whole, and you only want the lights that are in your camera shot. So FBX, it would be good here simply because the lights are off by default when you link in the FBX file. Then you only need to turn on a handful of lights. If you link in the Revit file, all the lights will be on by default. And unless you've got, one of those workhorse computers, then you'll probably want to turn lights off in that case, so your computer's not going after lights that are outside your camera shot. So in the end, both ways will get you to the same point, just a matter of how you want to go about, turning lights on and off and how long you feel it's going to take. And don't forget about the light lister. So once you do have a file in Revit, in Max, if you decide, oh, I wish I'd have done it the other way, so I can turn the lights on or off, cut down on your picks and clicks. Don't forget about the light lister. It's still one light at a time, but you can quickly turn the lights on or off with the light lister. Okay, great questions. Next question. Architecture and structure are typically two different models. Will this workflow be the same if there are two models linked? Yes, it would. What you want to do though is this is where exporting to FBX would help, because you'll set your 3D view up in Revit. Your models are linked into Revit. You export the FBX. You're still only linking in one FBX file into Max. But there's nothing stopping you from linking in multiple files in that manner. But do your linking first so you can check your lights. And if they are separate files, if you're linking in multiple Revit files into Max, get everything linked in, look at your camera view, and then run your scene converter, because then it'll capture all of the materials and the lights if there happen to be, both of those in each of those models. So still, what we covered today, you could have 10 files linked in or one. This process should help no matter what. Okay, I'll hold for a few moments, see if there's any other questions trickling in, but that was the last one so far. Doesn't look like there are any more. So if you do have any questions after we wrap up here, no problem. You'll be able to add those questions on the pages where the videos will be, and we can respond that way. Or you could email our support staff directly, and they'll make sure your question is passed on to the right people. Here comes another question. Materials seem to take time. Any best practices? There are. That topic is a little more specific, and it's outside our agenda for today, but not really. This will get you started. Obviously, I didn't cover everything there is to know about the material editor. That is usually something that we address when we conduct our training classes or in a webcast specifically for that topic. All right, I think that was the last question. I'd like to share some other resources that you have available to you. We do have a YouTube page where you'll find the recordings for all our previous webcasts. This one will be available tomorrow. Plus, we have plenty of articles on our blog at hagerman.com. We have additional content for customers on our customer hub. Also, Max has a dedicated site from Autodesk, and that address is area.autodesk.com. And for more in-depth assistance, if you have specific needs, you can contact us at Hagerman for those needs, as well as some training, if that's what you're after. Lastly, since it just came up, I'll go ahead and try to answer it. One more question. Does Max render faster than Revit? I guess that depends on who you ask. I like to say yes, simply because it's easier to do test renders more quickly. You can cancel more quickly. And just remember, Revit was built for building design as a primary function. Rendering is a secondary function in Revit. It's still pretty good at rendering. It just does it differently. Max, its primary purpose is rendering and animation. Modeling being, it's still strong on the modeling side. We don't use Max for developing our buildings, right? Because we can do that faster in Revit. So, that's why there's this workflow, so you can do what's faster in Revit and you can do what's faster in Max. But there is a workflow just for rendering inside of Revit. But I do encourage you to get a feel for Max, and I think you'll find that doing more iterations is faster in Max than it is in Revit. Yeah. Okay, thanks again for attending today. I hope you find this information useful. Ashley, back to you.
Okay, thanks, Brett. Thank you everyone for attending. Just a reminder that survey will pop up as we close down. And if you want to receive the AIA continuing education credit, you can leave your AIA number in that survey and we can submit that for you. Also a reminder that you will receive an email tomorrow, which will contain a link for the recording. And we will wrap things up now, but thank you everyone for attending and have a great day.